Good morning, everybody. It's now 8:30. Welcome to the Puna Kōrero meeting of the 7th of October, 2021. I'll go straight to the agenda with apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Trillin, and we also have, is Taku? No, he may zoom in at some stage. Okay. I'll put the apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Siuli. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Public forum, we have no requests from the public this morning, and so we'll move to conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts of interest people want to declare? Good. No? Excellent. Thank you very much. And so there are no conflicts of interest, and neither are there any items of extraordinary business. So that leads us to item 5, which is confirmation of the Te Puna Kōrero meeting of the 23rd of September this year. I'll move them to get them on the table. Do I have a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Ford. So I'm moving them as a true and correct record. Does anybody have any? I'm looking at you, Councillor Duncan. Yeah. No. I'll therefore put those minutes. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. So that moves us to the single substantive item on the agenda, well, the single item actually, and it is substantive, which is review of the general bylaw, traffic bylaw, part 16. I'm going to move that to get it onto the table. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Waddle. Thank you very much. So I'm taking this as read, councillors. We're being asked to adopt the statement of proposal, and that's going to go out for consultation, and that includes the draft transport bylaw 2021, which is also attached. So does anyone have any questions? Is it you going to be you, Sui? Yeah. Do you want to come up and just give us first, second? Okay, that's cool. Do you want to just give us a brief rundown? I acknowledge Taku as well. Thank you, Taku.
Good morning. Through the chair, there are a couple of changes that we'd like to draw your attention to. One thing we have taken on board from your direction is exploring options for the parking of trucks or heavy vehicles. So we're exploring a nuanced approach to that, and we are looking at working on a case-by-case basis, and we will look at the danger or the nuisance caused by that issue, rather than taking a general or a blanket restriction to it. You'll see from the paper that we have, well, it's multidisciplinary. So I'll now hand over, if you have no questions for me, to Hayden to talk to you about vehicles on beaches, particularly.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Sui. Before we get to Hayden, does anyone have any questions of the general paper of Sui?
Sorry, when you say case by case for trucks, what happens if we have a truck driver who arrives in town with his truck and he wants to park at Aotea because he's here for the night, staying up the road before he goes to a ferry? How are you going to do that case by case?
So, in talking with our monitoring and compliance team, it's a case of talking to that truck driver. If we get a complaint, then we will approach the truck driver, and we'll have to take the approach that our bylaw allows, which is you can't park here, or it's restricted, and we will have to talk with them about other areas where they could go.
I'll go back at that.
Yeah,
That just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, I can't understand. Actually, so are we having set areas as in along Papakowhai Road or wherever we've designed for trucks? Or are you saying they can't park, like we have a number of trucks that park in James Cook Drive because there's no houses there. You're going to say they're not going to be able to park there and you're going to talk to them on a one-by-one individual basis? Because that just does not work. People come along with these huge camper vans and that's fine if they're staying at their friend's house for one night or 2 nights, but you can't go and say, oh, the traffic compliance people are going to come out one day if someone makes a complaint.
Perhaps could I speak to that, just to add? So what we're doing is there's no blanket ban in the situation that you describe. People wouldn't go out for, say, one night. That where there are areas, it may be perfectly fine to park a vehicle. Where there's a complaint, it'll be assessed about whether it's likely to cause a danger or a nuisance. So we expect that there are situations where it'll be perfectly fine, that there won't be a danger or a nuisance for these to be done. So rather than take an approach that designates areas as prohibited from the start, it would involve assessing whether it is likely to cause that danger or nuisance, working with people to see if there's another option. In some places, in other councils, people have worked with the industry and you found a solution which doesn't require a bylaw approach. So we are proposing that.
Can I just go back at that one thing and say, as long as we don't take, oh, I don't like that view out my window, there's a truck there, which is what we've been getting from set areas in the community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan and then Councillor Ford.
Yeah, my question relates to engine braking. Apart from the spelling of braking, it occurred to me...
Thank you, Mike.
that prohibiting engine braking could potentially compromise safety. And so I went to Mr. Google to have a look, and he told me that New Zealand government and Australian government stepped away from prohibiting it because of that factor, because of the compromise. I wonder if we should say prohibit or should we just say restrict?
You're looking at me, I don't know. Yeah. We'll go back to the officers.
Through the chair, yeah. I thought we had looked at it as being prohibited or restricting engine braking because it's more a case of nuisance than safety, because the industry already have safety measures in place and we have speed limits in place for the safety issue. So it was more to cater for any nuisance caused to the public.
Yeah, which would be multiple times or every morning at the same time or whatever, I assume, that sort of thing. Councillor Duncan. Oh, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ford. I was busy thinking of...
Change my surname.
Yeah, if you like.
No, it's go. I had a question just around, can you define what nuisance is, and is there a threshold that the council has in terms of nuisance?
I haven't got the legislation in front of me. The way we looked at nuisance was it caused a public nuisance, namely noise. While we don't really monitor the noise complaints, or they do come to us, but it's the police who act on noise complaints. So we work with the police on that. But the main thing, especially for engine braking, is noise, is being the nuisance.
Okay. Councillor Wee Happy, then Councillor Morell. Oh, sorry. Well, you should have...
Sorry.
You're busy. Have your head down.
Yeah, no. So when you talk about nuisance, because it's in the parking, how do you define nuisance when it comes to parking?
Am I able to bring up our monitoring compliance officer, Marina, who will be able to give you a practical, explanation as what they do?
Good morning, through the chair. So are you talking in relation to heavy motor vehicles?
Yes.
And what will be considered a nuisance?
Yep.
So we normally measure that based on how that affects the affected parties, in particular that particular street or the houses or residents in that particular area. And for heavy motor vehicles, what we've found is for nuisance, there has to be a safety aspect. So whether it's a road safety issue for users coming in and out of the street, or also for residents that live in the area entering and exiting their properties. So the reason why we do it case-by-case basis is because not every street is the same. Yeah. Some are similar, but you're always going to have those things where you're dealing with different residents. So heavy motor vehicle parking has been a huge thing for us as enforcers because we've not had anything to sort of go to people and say, actually, you can't, in the bylaw, you can't have it here, but it also gives us a provision to restrict a particular road that we feel is actually wide enough to accommodate, and then say, come back to you and say, we've got this road here, can we put a bit of heavy motor vehicle parking? Yeah, sorry, I'm nervous.
Doing good.
Heavy motor vehicle parking
You're doing well.
on this piece of road, and we can designate that area so that, but that would only come if we see that there is a common trend amongst heavy motor vehicle parking in the city.
Yep. No, that's cool.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Can I, before you go, Councillor Weehappy, I just, while you're up there, Marina, so following on from Councillor Baker.
Councillor?
Sorry, Mayor Baker.
Demoted.
She knows what I mean. Following on from Mayor Baker, can you tell us about, so Papakowhai Road, so reasonably often, truck trailer units will park along there, and they'll park, it's fine further north along Papakowhai Road, but when you get south outside the lagoon where people park, they'll sometimes park there overnight. So they don't actually cause any problems as long as because nobody's there at that time. And so if they leave first thing in the morning, and let's say they were doing it on a consistent basis, what would we do about that?
That's a good example. So obviously you'll have to be evidence around to support why we would designate. So that's probably a perfect example of where I would probably designate the northern end of Papakowhai Road for heavy motor vehicles at a certain time, like at specified times, so that you still have it available for the public during whatever other time, but for, like, say, overnight, you still got that. The thing is that we need to be able to provide something for the public to go to, and that's a perfect area that we currently do now, because we believe that there we don't get much people complaining about heavy motor vehicles parking there overnight, and then they're normally gone by the morning.
Yeah, they're normally gone by the morning,
Yeah.
so it's fine. Okay, thank you. Anyone else got, while Marina's, have you got a question of Marina?
I don't, because Marina actually answered my question around the safety aspect, but I actually just really wanted to welcome this provision because I do know, particularly in the east and Severs Grove and I think in Hereford, Quinn Grove, we realise that people need to be employed, but some of these trucks are a health and safety aspect people can't see, and it can become dangerous. So I'm very happy that this is hopefully going to happen.
Very good. Before you do, Councillor Morell, did you have something?
Just page 12, it talks about the complaints on various streets, and over 4 years there's 62 complaints. So, I mean, I find that quite astounding because I could think, I guess this just applies to commercial vehicles, but if I drove around Porirua today, street by street, I could probably pay the rates for a year for about 101 suburb with illegal parking. So, the thing about illegal parking is that we've then got to enforce it. I mean, there are trucks on front lawns, there's cars on front lawns, there's cars backed up sideways everywhere through the community. And I see it every day, and I get So I just think if we've got a bylaw, somehow we've got to get tough. And I think that 62 complaints, there's obviously those streets, the streets there that we'd have, that's just a very small number, I would have thought, for recorded. But, you know, I mean, I'm just thinking, and I also like to just reiterate the James Cook Drive situation. We've got waste trucks parked there. Now we're getting a roundabout there. It's like dynamite driving through there at the moment. They're dangerous. So it's about enforcing. Whatever we come up with, we have to enforce it, because otherwise people just pay lip service to it.
Noted. And I'm sure officers note that as well.
I do drive around a lot, and I could send I could ring up all the time.
We understand. I'm not sure whether we can prevent people parking on their own front lawn, but is that true? We can't prevent. We can't do anything about it.
I meant on the booms,
Okay, you said their front lawn, but yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for officers regarding this? Yeah.
Yeah, this one relates to parking on the beach. When we had the workshop,
No, have we?
am I ahead of myself?
We're going to move to the beach in a second.
Okay.
Then you can have a free-for-all. So, okay.
So yeah, we'll bring up Hayden to talk to you about
Thank you.
parking on the beach.
Now we get to it.
So, kia ora councillors, kia ora taku, kia ora koutou. I would like to give you all an update on Tatahi Bay Beach. So, as most of you will be aware, there was a sign was put up by Greater Wellington Regional Council on Friday on the beach, and that's generated a fair bit of comment. Jack, could we cue that video? Ooh. So, you can see the sign in the foreground there. Cars parked all the way to the Surf Lifesaving Club, and then there's a car driving down the beach in what you might call an unsafe manner. So.
Shouldn't laugh.
This has generated quite a bit of comment online.
He comes and throws the bird at the sign. Yeah.
This was on the Saturday, I believe, posted on Facebook. So the sign went up on the Friday. It's caused quite a bit of comment, and those comments generally fall into two categories. There's a lot of confusion around what the rules are and where the rules apply. And then there's a lot of comments, obviously, about safety of pedestrians on the beach. So I just wanted to address this in light of today's meeting and what we're proposing in the traffic bylaw. What we're proposing will really remove any confusion. We'll put in very clear rules about where cars are and aren't allowed and why they're allowed on the beach. And the second thing is we'll obviously make it a lot safer for pedestrians, or at least that's our goal. So if there's any questions, happy to take them.
And
well, we can't, currently it's not in the traffic bylaw, so we can't, and it relies on Greater Wellington Regional Council doing it, but their rules relate to environmental protection. The police could prosecute as a dangerous driving charge, and so we're talking to the police about how we can do this better as well.
so I'll throw it open for questions. If anyone has any questions of Hayden. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, on page 28, we talk about exceptions made for mobility scooters. During the workshop, we discussed the potential or the chance that we could look at mobility cards and cars. Was that investigated?
So that is an option. We could allow for cars to park on the beach if they had a mobility permit displayed. We haven't currently gone with that, but through consultation, we'll take any advice on board and adjust as needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I can see mobility scooters bogging down in the sand there pretty easily.
Yes, but that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about mobility cards that a lot of people have and use to park in mobility car parks, who would then use that to park on the beach. I think we're talking about two different things here. We're not talking about mobility cards allowing you to park on the beach. We're talking about people with mobility scooters, aren't you?
But I could imagine in the sand there, they would bog down pretty easy. But with cars, it would make it easy for them to get on.
So one of the questions we're asking in the consultation is what can we do to make it easier for people with mobility issues to access the beach. There are quite a range of options we could consider, including, allowing for cars with mobility permits to park on the beach, improving the access ramp to the beach. So we're hoping to get a lot of feedback on that.
Yeah, that'll come through feedback. Are there any other questions of officers? Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora matua hia mana. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just have a comment because I think we need to put this. I'm indicating that I am giving my conditional support to this to the recommendations. I guess it's important that people who will be watching this understand why one of the Western Ward councillors would be, wanting to support this. Obviously, the beach is an area that's close to my heart and close to my whare. As it is for many people around, not just Tatahi Bay, but beyond as well. I should actually say also thank you to the officers for preparing a plethora of changes into this new transport bylaw, and also that, and I'm sure that I won't be the only councillor in saying this, that the officers should take great care in the final form of the bylaw that it does not disenfranchise those with accessibility issues, not just around the financial burden, the potential financial burden to those individuals when they are parking in the city, but also about ensuring that there is adequate access for those with accessibility challenges onto Tatahi Bay Beach. My personal view at this stage is that I'm not against cars, I'm against unsafe spaces. The video that has just been shown illustrates my concern and has been for many years. It is a hot issue, and I mentioned that the Mayor said that when she was first elected, she also had to be part of the public consultation on a similar issue, and the community was quite heated about this from different directions as well. Sadly, a small group of individuals ruined things for the rest of us. Earlier this week we had damage up at Whenua Tapu, up at the cemetery, by individuals. That is a wāhi tapu. And I think we should look at the beach as a wāhi tapu as well. Though there may be some out there who say that that the ability to park on the beach is a right. I would say that they are mistaken. I believe that it is a privilege that is extended at this stage to the only beach in the Wellington region. Our primary concern should be the safety of individuals on that beach, no matter what time they're down there, no matter how old they are or how able they are. And I think that everybody can probably get behind that, and I would question anyone who finds that that is not the top priority in their concerns when they are putting in feedback from the public. The bylaw does talk about restrictions that do not include access for those with accessibility challenges, for the surf lifesavers, for events that are council approved, as well as emergency services as well. Those are all legitimate and safe uses. They enhance the safety and allow everybody to use and enjoy that beach wherever they can. But there are still safety issues on that beach that are independent of whether there are vehicles on the beach or not. And I'm so glad that in the long-term plan that the efforts of Raywin and Colin, Lindsay, and hundreds of others who put a petition in into the long-term plan were rewarded with a safety audit. I'm looking forward, and my hope is that officers will be able to look at constructive measures that will help improve safety on that beach as well, irrespective of whatever happens with the new transport bylaw, or proposed bylaw, I should say. And likewise, I hope that people are constructive to that debate. Please use your words and not your rocks. Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Nalo, you have a...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, look, I like the many Porirua residents. I've spent a lot of lunch times parked on the beach, holding out on my family. But I guess my question, I'd like to know, do we have any idea of how many accidents there's been at the beach of cars versus people, if that makes sense? Is there...
Good question, Councillor.
Good question through you, the Chair. No, I'm afraid we don't have that information.
Does anyone else? Taku, do you have any comments you'd wish to make?
Just to say that, yeah, it is a topic that certainly has been debated for a long, long time. And as a kid, I remember cars down there, you had to get a crank handle up and start them up. And some of them just never had the ability to get out of sand ruts and all that sort of stuff. Today, vehicles, and particularly those that use them for other purposes like hoons and that, they're too quick, they're too fast, they're too big, and sometimes the drivers are uncontrollable. And so my point is that whether you want a further debate on this, but for me, my position is that I was down there the other day and I saw a notice tied to one of the posts there. And I didn't know whether it was serious because it was written in paint and handwritten, whether it was from the regional council or not. But it sort of suggested that cars ought to be allowed on the beach. But for me and the experiences that I've had and currently seen, whatever referendum or whatever agreement or debate, I'm of the opinion that it's best to be safe than sorry.
Right, thank you, Taku. I guess we're going to get some good feedback as a result of this consultation. I think, Councillor Sauli.
Just a question regarding other beaches around the region. Do they have access, to park, or is it restricted because of, barriers?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So most other beaches in the region do not permit cars on the beach. As far as I'm aware, there's none in the Wellington City District. Kapiti Coast do permit some cars on the beach for launching and retrieval of watercraft, which is what we're doing here. The difference being with Kapiti Beach is they're very long, they're very large, and the Tatahi Bay Beach in particular is quite constrained. It's less than 1 kilometre from end to end. And yeah, does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. The reason why I ask is because if it's barriers around the other beaches, if we're worried about kind of boats going into, why not kind of cut it off at that point? When the boats go down, why not have some sort of a barrier there so that no one else can kind of go beyond that, just for the boating people? That's a thought.
Yes, I can give a response to that too through the chair. That is an option. I think it's a last or a final option because, of course, there would be significant costs incurred to council and ratepayers if we have to go down that route. So what we're recommending initially is put the bylaw in place, and then hopefully through education we can change people's behaviour. If it proves to be the case that there's continued infringements, we can look at barriers and landscaping to prevent vehicle access to the beach.
Yeah, Mayor Baker, and then have you got a question, Councillor Hayward?
Yeah, that was, you mentioned the ramp to the beach and that it may need upgrading. At no point have we ever heard any budgets for upgrading ramps that could be really expensive. So just throwing that one in there worries me, but I'll leave it there because I suspect you may have to come back on that.
Yeah. Councillor Hayward?
Can I ask of officers then, if the proposed safety audit that's being held in conjunction with the transport bylaw is looking at improvements that would also impact upon traffic or vehicles on the beach as well?
So can I clarify through the chair? At this stage, we are not looking at any physical design changes. The safety audit will be, as you say, carried out concurrently, and recommendations will be presented to the council at the same time as deliberations on this bylaw. It's the 2nd of December. Through the LTP process, the safety audit was aimed at looking at making any improvements through existing budgets. So any additional budgetary requirements, if that happens to be the case, through the recommendations would have to be done through an annual plan process. But again, you'll have recommendations made to councillors on the 2nd of December. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, one last question.
Yeah, it's just to do with if we're talking about re-landscaping to stop cars, we've got to have emergency vehicle access to those places.
Yeah, I think that's noted in the
Yeah.
material. Yeah, thank you. I'll just before I put the motion, Councillor Trillin did note, and this is not about the beach, which he notes as well, charging stations for electric vehicles, which is good to hear. He'd like to hear more about that in the future and how we might facilitate charging stations, etc. Maybe as a separate topic in a workshop or something like that. He just wanted that noted. So there being no further questions, we'll look forward to the consultation process and what comes out of it, and having to consider that at a later date. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you, officers, for the work. That brings us to the close of the meeting, there being no further business. And I'll